There are parallels between the art of filmmaking and the process of entrepreneurship. There's a power to storytelling and how it can ignite the fire within individuals, propelling them to execute the grand vision, as Nelson says, and there's a need to personalise learning and incentivise individuals to grow and prosper. Nelson Sivalingam, CEO and co-founder of How Now. Let's hear what he has to say. Hello and welcome to the Practical Leadership Podcast, where I interview great leaders and try to extract their wisdom and experience for you to learn from and hopefully avoid making their mistakes. Check out practical-leadership.academy because you want to help your new managers succeed with hybrid or remote working. Nelson Sivalingam, thank you so much for joining me. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
You are CEO and co-founder of How Now, which I'm sure we'll hear all about. You are an author of Learning at Speed by Coben Page, available in all good bookshops now, hard copy available. Filmmaker, documentary, superstar. You've been around for quite a while. You've been doing lots of things. Now, that was far too short and far too high a level of an introduction. What did I miss out, Nelson?
Paul, you make me sound old, like I've been around for years. I just started young. I just want to clear this for anyone listening. I'm not as old as what Paul makes it out to be. But no, I guess summed it up well, Paul. But my background is just been in tech and films, really. It's been building tech startups over the last kind of 15 years. Some we've done well, some we've sold. And so it's been a journey in different sectors, so really different domains, all the way from kind of video advertising to film to hospitalities with a small restaurant group, all the way to now in L&D. So it's been a varied entrepreneurial journey. Is the best way to summarize it.
What's the red thread?
I like to build things, Paul. I think often when the going gets tough and you constantly kind of ask yourself, why the hell am I doing this? And so I did it once, but why the hell do I go back into it again? And I've learned the reason is because I like building things, right? And I think whether it's a product, whether it's a company, it's just getting to build things. It didn't exist and now it does, and it wouldn't have existed if I didn't play a part in it. And I think there's something about that that's really addictive.
It's one of the definitions of leadership, isn't it? It's taking people to a place they wouldn't have gotten on their own. You're building something.
And it's the hardest thing too.
Building something that previously didn't exist and wouldn't have existed without you and your effort.
Yeah, and that was kind of the reason why I left my last proper job. Is because kind of working in a large company, I didn't really, classic case, a big company, didn't really feel my impact. I felt like I could be easily replaced. It was a great culture, fun, I had a lot of fun, but I didn't feel like I was getting to build things. And so I actually left my last proper job with the intention of joining a really small company. And it just happened at that time while I was looking for a job, I had an idea for something that I started. And since then, I've not looked back.
So I think I would also consider that one of the red threads is none of really what you've done on your own, even whether it's filmmaking or whether it's Sri Lankan street food cooking or whatever. I can imagine you're a superb cook, but were you actually on the griddle? Probably not. You're doing this with other people, right? And where you've got to now is you are leading an organization, a company, How Now, that helps other companies in turn upskill, reskill, and help people learn new stuff. Because yes, you want to go off and you want to hire somebody who can do a job. You want to hire somebody who knows how to be a chef, right? But if that's the be all and end all, then, well, how are you going to grow? How are they going to grow? And the way that we all grow these companies, you build things as you build. At least that's what I think. Am I missing a trick?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just want to confirm I wasn't the chef. What I was good at doing was I was good at trying the food, knowing it was good, and then taking it to people, right? And a big part of that, like you said, Paul, is finding other people to fill roles that can help you get to that end destination. So a big part of it is finding the right people and getting people to align to that vision. And this is where, interestingly enough, I find a lot of similarities between making a film and building a business, because they both start with, especially as a founder, they start with a vision of where you want to get to. And much like how in a film, you don't do every role. Like even in a low budget film, you might do more than one role, but you've got actors, you've got maybe someone behind the camera, you've got someone editing, someone doing the music. There's so many different people who are experts in their craft, and they're coming together to essentially help you execute on your vision, which is exactly what happens in a business, right? You're essentially, you have a vision of where this business needs to go, and you're bringing in experts who essentially help you execute on that vision and get you there. And so I find a lot of parallels when I kind of started growing my first startup, having come out of a film production company. It's like, this is very similar, right? Like the way you need to inspire people with that vision and motivate them, and keep everyone aligned so it's consistent in terms of what you're executing. So definitely, it's the most important and the hardest part. Don't get me wrong. There are moments when you're working with people, you think, the next time I start something, it's just going to be me and AI. It's so difficult to figure people out and understand what motivates them and how to get the best out of them, because humans are complex. But that's also the most rewarding part. That's what makes this game so exciting and interesting. You try to figure out people.
Yeah. And multiple people. It's three-dimensional chess.
Yeah.
Oh, love. So there does seem to be a bit of the tension, I think. If you think of the filmmaking piece and you think of business, you think of your startup, you are trying to envision people, you're trying to direct them, lead them towards a bright, sunlit upland by telling them a story. But at the same time, and of course, I'm sure you see this in all the different organizations you work with, storytelling is very important. That's great. That's storytelling. And my wife's an engineer. She can't stand storytellers. Now, that's unfortunate because she's married to one. Once upon a time. So you've got the storytelling piece. But then to actually get stuff done, which is hard, is the organization, as you said, the coordination, the building and the strengths of the individuals towards the end goal, but executing, getting stuff done. There's a chap, Gavin Hess, is a CEO of a company called Consensus, and he's on an episode here, and he says one of the big jobs, the job of any leader, is to get stuff done. That's it, get stuff done. And there's too many people who tell too many stories. How do you reconcile both in filmmaking and in your business, storytelling, vision and execution?
It's a great question. I think it's all about the balance there, because I do think the story is a very, very critical piece, right? I think sometimes people can kind of misunderstand storytelling as a kind of fluffy thing to do, but actually, I've learned over the years how it's in how authentic that story is and what you tell. Because what the story helps you do is it basically where you're going. It gives you direction. But what's important about telling a story is to tell each person what their role is in that story. All right. It's like they say in films that there are no small parts. Anyone who's recently watched Oppenheimer, where there are so many A-listers playing roles that come in for 5-10 minutes, well, it's because every single part there is contributing to telling that story and moving that story forward. And that's exactly what the case is in business. There are no small parts. But what is important is for each person, for them to not feel like the small part, is to understand how does their role, their part contribute to moving that story forward? Right? Why is it such an important part to that story? And often I think that's what people miss, is they tell the story at a very high level, this is the company's story, but they miss out the part of telling me what's my role, right? Why is what I'm doing matters? And that's really important to get the best out of people, because then they know the work they do matters. They know it's aligned to telling the bigger story. And to me, whether it's product, whether it's business, it's all a story. It's a story we tell ourselves. It's a story we tell the people we work with. It's a story we tell our customers. It's a story I tell my investors. And they each play a role in that story. Now, rightly so, once you've told someone this is their role in that story, it's how do I get to do that job as well as possible? And this is where what I struggled with in my last proper job was hierarchy, right? I always struggled with this idea of authority and management, and you do what I'm told. And so when I became a first-time manager by chance, I became a first-time manager the first time I hired people. Up until then, I had never managed people. So the first people I managed were the people I hired into my startup. And so it was learning on the job. And one thing I was very aware of is I didn't want to replicate the kind of hierarchy and authority and that culture that existed in the larger corporates that I had worked at. And so I was questioning myself of, okay, what's the purpose? I don't want to be that, bringing that hierarchy. So what do I have to do in it? And over time, what I learned is my role there was to kind of set the bar, right? I needed to know what good looked like. I didn't need to be able to do everyone's job, but I needed to know what good looked like. And this is where you build taste. Like, I don't have to be a great designer to know what good design looks like. And so I think building that taste, the kind of aptitude for what good looks like is a critical piece to setting that bar. That's the first thing. The second thing for me is I create the conditions for you to jump that bar, right? Do you have the tools, right? Do you have the skills? Do you have the knowledge? What is it that you need? Are you working in the right environment? Is it the office? Is it remote? Whatever the conditions are for you to be able to jump the bar. And so for me, hierarchy doesn't even come into the play here for you to get the work done, right? I'm doing a job, you're doing a job. It's just my job entails setting the bar and helping you jump the bar. And your job entails doing the job, right? And jumping the bar. And it's the same way how in sports, right? The coach doesn't have to be a better player, and often aren't. They're not a better player than the players who are playing on the pitch. And it's not about the hierarchy there. They have a role to fulfill. Player has a role to fulfill. Let's take the hierarchy out of this. We're both here to do a job. And I think it's that. And one of the kind of ideas that really stuck with me is actually this word in Swahili called Ubuntu. I don't know if you've come across it, Paul. But I found this much, much later on where I think it captured how I felt about building a team and managing people. And there are different meanings, the idea of kind of collectiveness, togetherness. But what I really take from it is I can't do what I do without you doing what you do, right? And that's so true in running a team and building a business, right? It's so interconnected. You can't be a great manager without people in your team doing a great job. Right, period. And so you really need to live the kind of principle of Ubuntu, of making sure you're doing your bit so they can do their bit. And that was my kind of taking away of how I started to manage people.
So you set the bar, the taste, see there's the food coming through that. You give them the tools to help them jump the bar. How do you make sure it's keeping on going? What's the third T here? Is there a third T we can find out? Because the one thing that I found most recently was doing some work with a B2C company, which is new for me actually. It's an app company, wonderful, wonderful bunch of people. And working with a really experienced growth marketeer there. And we were talking about the idea of North Star metric. And I've always said that I can't stand with the big company idea of what you have internal customers, the legal teams, the internal customers, the sales group, who's the internal customer. No. You get one customer, and they're the guys with the girls with the money, right? You've got the customer at the end of the telescope, right down there. People who actually write the organization a check are your customer, whether you are the person sweeping the floor and cleaning the toilets, or the chief executive, or the legal team, or the finance team, or the sales team, or whatever it is you are. That's it. So that North Star metric, that tally, perhaps, right? You're trying to tally up, you're measuring something. So I'm looking for a T here. Right? So you've got the taste to set the bar, you've got the tools to jump the bar, the talent, perhaps, that you're acquiring into the organization. How do you continue that so that you say it? How do we measure them?
Yeah, I mean, not a T. I'll have to think of a T, but it is the accountability. That's what I was going to say. So the accountability is the key piece, right? The manager's role is, once I've set the bar, I've created the condition. Now you have what you need, and I need to hold you accountable to deliver it. Right? It's about deliverables. And this is something we've had since day one, since our first business, right? I was never really a fan of, sit at your desk for 8 hours, whether you've got work to do or not, right? I remember in my first corporate job, everyone would be sat at the desk until the manager left to go home, right? And there was almost this competition to stay as long as you can, right? And I'm sure many people listening have been there. And because I didn't like that and agree with it, when I was building my first business and beyond, I was very clear that's not the culture I wanted to create. So I was always against this idea of hour tracking, etc., which meant you need a way of holding people accountable. So we've always been deliverables first, right? We mutually agree on what needs to be done, right? And once we've done that, now we know where we're going, right? We know what done looks like. And this is where it's a really good principle from agile methodology. It's a definition of done, which I've seen across other teams and businesses. Sometimes this is where they lack clarity, right? Is the manager thinks, got an idea of what done is, but they've assumed a lot of things. And then the person in the team has a different interpretation of done with assumptions baked in. And so they're working on different paths. And what you need to be very clear on is we both have the same definition of done, right? We both have the same definition of what good looks like. And then I hold you accountable to get there, right? And going back to what you said, what I completely agree around having a customer-centric metric. And that's why every single team at How Now, a part of their performance bone comes from a customer-related metric. Every team, right? There's no team that's not impacting the customer, right? Whether you're an engineer, sometimes I've only seen this done with customer-facing teams, right? People think, it's only sales and customer success who are impacting the customer. Not true, right? Every single person working at the organization is doing it to deliver an incredible customer experience, right? And if they're not, then what are they doing, right? We're not aligned in telling the story that we're trying to tell. And so, yeah, definitely agree on that metric being there. But when you have that customer metric, what's really important is going back to what I mentioned earlier around how is your role connected back to the story? I'll give you an example. So our product managers are financially incentivized on win rate and customer retention. Doesn't happen that often, right? Sometimes it's based on product delivery, all of those kind of things. Maybe product NPS is the closest you might get to. But actually, we have a very commercial metric, right? And so in the early days, the conversation is, well, I can't influence this metric, right? What if the salesperson is not winning a deal? And so we got them the close loss data. Okay, why are we losing deals? Let's see. How often does it come up about product mentions, etc.? And you realize everyone is playing a part. So it's making them understand what we should be doing as a product team is to understand, okay, what are our customers saying? What are our prospects saying? What are they saying about the product? Why is it not solving their problem? Let's take that data. That's what we should be doing in product. So it's helping them understand, by doing that part better, we win more deals. When we win more deals, what that means is we're helping more organizations build the skills they need to be successful at what they do. Right. And our mission at How Now is to make meaningful learning a part of everyday work. And we need to take this feedback to improve our product so we can do that mission better for organizations. And so that's why I do believe every team should have a customer-centric metric.
Making meaningful learning a part of everyday work. I mean, if you are a leader and a manager and you forget that your job is people and that people need to learn in order to thrive, things that don't change, die very quickly. If your plant isn't growing, it's going to wither. So making meaningful learning a part of everyday work, I think, is a fairly good mantra for any leader or any manager to actually have tattooed in the inside of their nostrils. Talk to me about How Now. What is it that How Now does to make meaningful learning? Right? Give us the commercial here. That's your pattern. It's a great platform and a great company there. So tell us about it. It's valuable.
I think it's to think about what is our biggest challenge right? I shouldn't really have to convince anyone that as it stands now, you really need to think about, are your people building the skills they need? I mean, there's an incredible statistic that came out that said in the US right now, there are 6 open roles for every qualified person who can do that job. So our biggest problem as someone who's running a business isn't robots are going to take our jobs. Our biggest problem is we don't have enough humans who are qualified to do the jobs that we need, right? And so it's going to be very expensive and very competitive to buy talent externally. And internally, we have a problem because if you're not supporting people's growth, they're leaving, right? And they can leave because there's so much job opportunity in the market. And so what they'll do is they'll keep walking until they find the company that's going to support them in their growth. So what you need to be able to do is support your employees' growth. Now, let's work backwards. For employees to be able to grow, they need the skills to be able to perform better and grow in their career. Now, for them to build those skills, they need to engage in learning. Now, if in your organization, people say, learning feels like an unwanted interruption, why are you bothering me to do that? That means they don't find the learning relevant and they're not able to access the things they need at that moment of need, right? And this is what we call the engagement gap. People are not engaging, right? They're not engaging with what you're offering from an L&D perspective. And if they're not engaging, they're not building the skills they need. If they're not building the skills they need, they're not progressing their career, they're going to leave. So how do we close this engagement gap? Because that's where it all starts. And that's where
don't offer them trash. Don't offer them trash compliance. I mean, how much?
Absolutely.
Yeah, my wife has started working about 6 months ago with a bank, and she was given 20 hours of compliance training to do. 20. Oh my goodness. Welcome to the company. Here, click next for the next 20 hours. Holy guacamole. So engagement.
And I think that's not engaging. If you're an L&D team doing that, you're going to very quickly find out that you're not going to get any buy-in. Right? Your budget's going to be cut. Like compliance, they'll very quickly realize, companies, which they are, if it's compliance that I'm interested in, and that's what the C-suite are interested in, then they'll just buy some compliance suite. They don't need an L&D person to administer compliance content. Just get a library, push it out to people, and you've got the audit trail, right? But when the C-suite are asking you, do we have the skills to get work done? That's right. If we're losing our best talent,
that's a commercial
question. If we're losing our best talent, yeah, absolutely. If we're losing our best talent and we can't hire because it's so competitive and expensive, businesses are going to get to a point where, forget innovating, they're going to struggle to have the skills to simply meet customer demands and get work done. And so to close that engagement gap, there are probably two things that the current kind of learning technology stack is failing at. And those two things is the learning super relevant? And is it easily accessible at that moment of need? They're the two things. If you're able to solve that, I would be able to bring in relevant learning into the flow of work at the moment of need. When this person needs to know something, they're able to find the most relevant learning, knowledge expert who's going to help them build, learn that thing, apply that skill, to get feedback, improve at their job. Now, that's where most L&D teams are failing. A lot of this stuff is irrelevant. And also it's super difficult to access. So what we do at How Now is we're laser focused on super relevant learning delivered at the moment of need. And what that does is it engages people, right? They engage. And what it does is when they engage, it creates a positive feedback loop. To give you an example of how that positive feedback loop works, imagine, why do we go to Google? We go to Google when we have something to search, right? We need to know something. So I go to Google, I search for something, I find something that's relevant. I'm more likely to engage with it because it was in my moment of need. I'm more likely to apply it. And when I apply it, it creates a positive feedback loop. And that positive feedback loop keeps me coming back to Google. Because I'm like, the last time I went to Google, it was great. I got something, I engaged with it, applied it. That doesn't exist in workplace learning as much, right? There is no positive feedback loop because it's often pushed at an irrelevant time, but we're basically pushing wrong content to the wrong person at the wrong time for the wrong reason. And therefore, people are not going to engage. And so that's what we do at How Now. We help you bring relevant learning into the flow of work. How we do that is by understanding what skills does each individual need, right? So we use, unsurprisingly, for the last 5 years, we've been using AI to understand using external job market data and using internal talent data to automatically map every individual against the skills they should have, then to measure to what level of proficiency they have those skills. And then we bring together your entire learning ecosystem. And that's a really important thing. Let me ask you, Paul, when was the last time you learned something that had a big impact on your performance in career?
Probably about 3 or 4 months ago, and I completed an interesting course. It was on it was financial management, and I was doing a piece for a board. I didn't know what I was doing, so I went, excuse me, I'm going to go off and do this. I went off and did a research. So,
right. And why did you go do that course? What brought you to that course?
It was I understood that there was something I didn't understand. That was the thing. There was a known unknown there. That was the difference. I actually knew there was an unknown. There wasn't an unknown.
Yeah. And so when I asked this question to a range of different people, what that resource was changing, right? For you, it was a course that you seeked out and you wanted more structured learning. For someone else, it could be this podcast, right? They listened to Paul's podcast and actually it really clicked and it helped them as a first-time manager. It could be a book. It could be a conversation with a colleague. And the reality is there's such a diverse learning ecosystem for how we learn based on that moment of need. Yet in most organizations, we're pushing out an LMS with e-learning school courses or classroom training and saying this is is the way we're going to try to meet every need we have in the organization. So what we do at How Now is bring that ecosystem together. We map it to your skills gaps that we've identified, and we deliver it within the apps and systems and tools that you're already using. Because the reality is most of us don't spend 90% of our time inside of an LMS. We spend our time inside our inbox, our CRM, our help desk, on Google in our inbox. And what we use that skills data and contextual data to recommend relevant learning and help businesses connect people with relevant learning in those moments of need. You get 5 times more engagement than you get with a traditional LMS. And because of that engagement, people are building the skills they need to build. And the C-suite are happy because they can actually track, oh, these are the skills that we're building. That's really useful, right? We really wanted to improve React as a skill. I can see in the last 6 months, we've gone from an average proficiency level of 2 out of 5 to 4 out of 5. L&D are doing a good job.
Somebody's just kept their job. Yeah. Your L&D person just kept their job. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it from a point of view of any organization, they are trying to reduce risk, reduce costs, or increase revenue. That's the 3 things that any organization does. From the individuals, the people point of view, you're trying to recruit, you're trying to retain, and you're trying to develop those people, okay? Now, putting those 2 together, you're then looking at, from a skills point of view, of understanding what are the skills I need, what are the skills I've got, and then how do I fit the gap? How do I fill that gap? So that is like a tripartite 9-box grid or something like that. I'm sure somebody could map that more cleverly than me. And if I can see that somebody's ticking all those boxes in 3-dimensional chess, as we've talked about, then we're on a road to growth.
For sure. I think this is where right now the kind of traditional approach to L&D is very content-led, right? It's very kind of, the question we're asking ourselves is, what content do people need and how do I get them that content? Not just L&D, people managers, right?
So
how many times have you met a manager? Yeah, exactly. How many times have you met a manager who's like, what content do I need for this, and how do I get this content to them? Is it a course or is it a training? It's the wrong question, right? The language the business understands is skills. It's a common language that we all within business understand. The employee understands skills. They understand, I don't have this skill, I need this skill. And the people manager understands, I don't have this skill in my team. The business, the C-suite understands that these are the skills that we need to be able to move in this direction. It's a common language. Content is, right? C-suite doesn't care, how many courses you've been to. They don't care whether you sat there for 40 hours doing this. What they want to know is, did you build the skills the business needed? So we need to change our language, and we need to move towards more of a skills-first approach. What that means is it changes your fundamental question. The question you're asking is, what skills does this person need? And how am I going to help them build those skills? That's a very different question, right? It's a very different question with an outcome very much aligned to what the business wants. And so it is a change in mindset more than anything, right? I shouldn't really be saying this as a founder, as a software business, but the software is there to help you exit, right? Can you change your mindset? Yeah, it's an enabler. Can you change your mindset and start hacking together solutions to go in the right direction? Absolutely. Absolutely, you can. It'll take a lot of admin and it'll take a lot of people and a lot of inefficiencies. But it doesn't mean you can't start pivoting and moving in the right direction and then bring in the right technology to help you enable and reduce the friction and take out the inefficiencies. But this is a mindset change. We need to change the question we're asking. To get to the right answer, we need to ask the right question. And right now we're asking the wrong question.
And the L&D response is, I think, is typically, yes, of course, I'll go off and find you that course content thing, whatever it is. And I think their first answer should always be why. So some person comes to you and says, oh, I need a course on this. Because that's what they think. You automatically, it's like marketing. You skip to I need a TikTok video pushed out on this. And of course, any good marketing would say, oh, yes, TikTok, well, whatever the channel is, you go to the result there, the thing you're doing, without going into the diagnostic. And you talk to good practitioners in learning and organizational development, skills development. And their first questions are, why? Why? What is the impediment? Why? What have you tried? What hasn't worked? They become consultative. And only then, after the whys, do they get to the right. Well, maybe a course isn't the right answer. Is the right answer? Maybe a PDF or an all hands or an email. We could send them an email. That'll do.
I've got an entire chapter in my book, Paul, in Learning at
Learning at
Speed,
Speed,
which
published
is
by
dedicated
Kogan Page, available on Amazon. Link in the description.
Which is dedicated to problem discovery, right? And it's about it, and this is where, in a way, L&D people, I find a lot of commonalities between L&D and founders or anyone who builds product, right? Because in essence, L&D are building a product that's hired to get a job done, right? And the job to be done in this case is to build the skills that I need as an individual or the business needs. That's the job to be done that they're hiring this product for. And that product happens to be a learning experience. And like you said, it could be anything all the way from an email to a coaching session to a course to a book. And that's the product I'm hiring to get this done. And so it requires that kind of product mindset. Like, the kind of 101 in being a founder and building a product is, you spend 6 months in a room building a product without never talking to a customer. It's like the 101 rookie mistake that you never do. And that's essentially what I see L&D managers and L&D teams doing. It's sitting in a vacuum building content and hoping that quote unquote fun and interactive content is going to solve the problem. Versus actually, if you spend more time up front doing that discovery to really understand that problem, the pain point, what's the obstacle? What's stopping you from doing that today? And asking those right questions to form that hypothesis around what the problem is. So really love the problem, not the solution. And I have my theory for why this happened, right? It's because right now we have a very output-centric mindset. And that output mindset is almost to prove value. We're like, what if my boss asks me, what the hell have you been doing for the last 6 months? If I turned around and said, well, I've been talking to people in the business that understand the problem, they don't think that's value enough. And so they think more value to say, I've built around 50 courses, right? I've been working hard. Look at this. I've got tangible output. But we need a collective mindset shift to go, actually, it's outcome over output. Right? I don't care how many courses you created. I want to know, did you close this skills gap that we said was one of the biggest obstacles for us to achieve our Q3 OKR? Have you helped me do that? And if the business was willing to accept that it's going to take a lot of experimenting, trial and error to see what works, what doesn't work to get to that outcome. And I'm not going to judge you in the same way I said, I don't judge you based on how many hours you sat on your ass at a desk. I judge you based on whether you gave me the deliverable. Did we achieve the outcome or not? So I think that outcome over output, it's not just an L&D thing. I think it's an important thing for any leader or manager is, what you hire people for is to get to the outcome, not for the output.
And I think from a management point of view, managing activity is much more sensible because the output itself is the result. And if you try and manage the result, if you think of a salesperson, you're going to try and manage the number. Go and sell more. Well, you can't do that. You've got to break it down. You've got to manage that output. And therefore, because you're trying to manage you've got to manage towards the output. You're trying to manage the activity because that's the tangible piece. That's where you put all your focus. And you forget that the objective is to deliver the output.
Yeah. I mean, the sales is a great example, right? Like you set you have to make 60 calls a day, right? And you set that as a number. In some cases, that's what you're measuring performance on. Incentives drive behavior, right? And you optimize for whatever the incentive is, right? And so
we're humans, what we do.
If the incentive is, a great example is actually something like your Fitbit. Anyone who's sleep tracking or step count, how many people now are conscious of the fact that have I done my 10,000 steps? Why? Is when you measure something, right? That's the incentive that drives your behavior. I want to get more steps and I'm out. So if you're measuring the wrong thing, you're motivated by the wrong thing. So if it's 60 calls a day, but it's not translating into qualified demos or it's not translating into customers, then it doesn't really matter. Right? In the same way where we've worked with businesses previously who set a target of 40 hours of learning every month. I've never worked with a business where every employee was so conscious of whether they hit their 40 hours or not. We would have people on our intercom support going, can you please tell me how many hours I'm at? Has this updated? Can you give me an export? And so, it was driving the behavior of they wanted to hit 40 hours. They didn't care whether they learned anything relevant. Did it help them build the skills they need? The wrong incentive drives the wrong behavior. And that's why it's important for your incentive to be aligned to the outcome. Because fundamentally, that's what we want.
It goes back to your telescope and your North Star and your customer centric or whatever it is your metric is. Thank you. Nelson, is there something in your vast and varied career, going all the way back to when you were just a little Nelson, what would you like to thank younger Nelson for doing?
So I'd say that I'm not super smart, I'm not super athletic, and nor was the little Nelson, either of those things. But one of the things that I always kind of lean on is the curiosity, right? There's never been a time where if I didn't know something, I didn't think I could figure it out. It's like, well, it's always a comparison of, I didn't know it. I wasn't gifted. I didn't know it from the get-go. Maybe it took me a bit longer to figure out, but there's always this kind of interest, curiosity, to be able to go, how does that work? Let's figure that out. Like, I didn't have anyone in my family who'd start a business, raise venture money. And at the time where we started, London didn't even really have a startup. This is pre-Google campus days. And so you didn't even have many people you can go and ask to. It's all kind of, what you Google, what you find, books you read, all of that kind of stuff. But even then, what feels like a massive mountain of lots of unknown, I was delusional enough not to be fearful and to really go, curious, let's figure this out. And there's a lot of unknown, but I'm going to figure it out. And that combination of curiosity and delusion in the right dosage is what I kind of thank little Nelson for, and until this day that I hold very dearly. Is the combination of those two things is what's kind of moved this forward.
I would say, if I can reframe your delusion into optimism, grit. So it's not.
I often say it's a weird. As a founder, you're constantly you're like a walking contradiction, because you're like the eternal optimist who's constantly paranoid.
Yeah, I love that. Paranoid optimist. Paranoia if they're not actually out to get you. Marvelous. Lastly, as we wrap up, how can people find you?
Find me in all the usual places. You can find me at Nelson Sivalingam on LinkedIn, probably the place I'm most present. But also you can find me on Twitter, X rather. I should correct myself. You can find me on X, that Nelson dude. Don't really tweet much, but you can still find me there. And if you do want to reach out, feel free to reach out. I'm Nelson@gethownow.com.
Nelson Sivalingam, CEO of How Now, author of Learning at Speed, filmmaker, podcast host, and street food cook extraordinaire. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap. Thank you for joining me today. Your homework is to leave your 5-star review, and please, any comments you have, you really help me to improve every day, and it also helps people to discover me online. You should check out practical-leadership.academy, because you want to help your new managers succeed with hybrid or remote working.